Hi everyone, I'm Cole, the Vegan Ape, and this video is about my thoughts and beliefs about the way the world runs. So I wanted to share my thoughts and opinions about the way the world is. For posterity, for myself, I just want to record them, but also I thought I could share them and perhaps you feel the same way, or perhaps you feel largely the same way and I've just made you consider other things, or perhaps there's things you think I haven't considered and you'd like to share those with me, or maybe you disagree. But whatever the case, I welcome communication, so if you want to comment, obviously I'll appreciate that. The way the world is all man-made. The developed world, if you live in the developed world and you look out the window, everything you see is man-made, it's all artificial. Obviously that's true in towns and cities, but also it's true in rural areas and agricultural areas. If you look out the window and you see fields, that's not natural, that's not nature. You're looking at fields that are monocultures, usually of grass generally, but other plants as well. So I come from Cornwall in the UK, and if you look at Cornwall on Google Earth and zoom in, you'll see that it's about 90 or 95 or whatever % grass. And the grass is there for cows, and the cows are there for people. I call it a grass desert, because no other life can thrive there. It's all man-made, even the fields. But also, everything about the way we live is man-made. Not that it was intentionally made the way it is, but it has been made the way it is by humans. So we are responsible for the way it is. And that includes the way we're governed, that includes how we live our day. For example, going to work and working 8 hours or 10 hours or whatever people do. We made it that way. We didn't have to be that way. It doesn't take 10 hours to provide all humans' needs, but we've structured it in such a way that we generally do that much work. If you look at tribal cultures, they tend to work around equivalent to what we would consider work. They tend to do around 2 hours a day, which I would say is a much healthier ratio of labour to free time and to leisure time. And that's the way it could have been. We could have had the world that way, but we haven't. We did it the way it is. And I don't think of it as a utopia. I think we could have done a lot better, and hopefully in the future it will be better. When we talk about how the world is run, I think about this a Princeton study that I read. So the Princeton study showed that whatever the will of the voters, whether that was they were 100% behind a change or a policy coming through, or completely opposed and 0% in favour, it had about a 30% chance of being passed. So the will of the people had no effect on whether changes were made, new policies were made, laws were made. When you compare that to, as the study did, corporate interests, they actually did influence the policy changes. I think it was more or less if 100% of the moneyed interests wanted a change, they had about a 60% chance of getting through. But more closely linked was if they all opposed it, it definitely wouldn't get through. So if the 0% of the corporate interests were in favour of a policy, there was a 0% chance of that policy coming through. So they had a much closer alignment with what the government did, which proves it as an oligarchy. The US is a country run for the wealthy, and that's just been proven. I'm pretty sure that's true for every developed nation, which is obviously not a good thing. The world is run for the rich, but most of the world are poor. So however much we're told we have control, we're living in democracies, it's just not true at all. And I had hoped that an answer would come from within the system. When I was quite taken with Bernie Sanders, I don't know if you've followed him at all, but in the US there was a senator running for the Democratic nomination for president. He is a democratic socialist, and he just says everything that's completely right, and you just think, wow, how can a politician say things that are true? So I followed him. And also in the UK we have Jeremy Corbyn, who's very much along similar lines of the socialism. And it just seems like that's right, so it can't happen. Now that we've sort of been beaten down, my will so that I just don't think that changes can come from within the system. And sadly, I was proven right, because in the US elections, Hillary Clinton, I believe, had the election rigged for her to win. I don't know if how involved she was. I'm not going to get into that specifically, but Bernie Sanders lost that nomination to Hillary Clinton, and she is the corporate candidate. So, there's lots of evidence that's persuaded me that election was rigged for the rich, because she's going to represent the rich no matter what she says, and Bernie would have represented everyone else. So I'm discouraged from thinking an answer can come from within the system. The world is like a treadmill for the poor, built by the rich to maintain the status quo of the rich on top. Now the poor are being manipulated and exploited so that the rich can continue to live in luxury. Obviously this isn't a fair system, but actually our needs are very modest, and it's very easy to meet our needs. We are basically just talking about food, shelter, socialization, so just being around people, and then just things that we get for free like the sun and exercise. So those are the needs that a human has. But we've made the world much more complex than that, and I think that's been done to because if we were satisfied and contented with the very few things we actually need, we would be less easy to manipulate and exploit. If we were healthy and happy, we couldn't be taught to hate or fear others, or be jealous of other people for having more, because if you're content, why would you want more? So it's so that a population that's healthy and happy and contented with what they have is a terrible population to if your aim is to manipulate and generate cash, because if you're content, you don't go out and buy loads of stuff. The media, the world media, is corporate controlled, so it's owned by rich people. And the problem with having a biased media is that the populations of the world don't get a true understanding of the way the world is, of their countries, foreign policy, and how it's perceived abroad, things like that. And we're not told the truth about corporations, about how our rights are being eroded and corporations' rights are being strengthened all the time. Because if corporations control the media, then how it's not in their interest to inform us of these things. It's in their interest to control what we see, to manipulate us, so that we can be docile and we're not a threat to their interests. If we've been manipulated by a corrupt and biased mainstream media, then how can we understand our best interests? And if we can't understand our best interests, we can't even recognise our best interests, then how can we vote for them? So any idea, even if there was a democracy, even if our votes had value, how could we know who to vote for? Because when you think how many people, at least in the UK, are, brainwashed, or at least, highly value the opinions of mainstream media outlets like The Sun, the Daily Mail, and Sky News, and even the BBC News, who are all provably corrupt and biased. So democracy is further undermined by the media in this way. We can't vote for our interests if we don't recognise our interests. The only a silver lining of this on this issue is that the younger generation are less enthralled to mainstream media, because we have the internet, so we have alternate sources. So that does take away some of the power that the mainstream media has, at least with people that have the motivation to look for information, for objective information, that it can be found, which does take away the power. But the problem is we are in the minority. The people that are looking are in the minority. So with the tiny amount of influence over democracy that our votes possibly have, maybe they're not even counted. For example, like I say, the US Democratic primaries, I don't think that the elections were fair. I think they were actually rigged. But given, accepting that an election is fair, Our vote really carries very little influence when it's one person, out of millions, and it's once every 4 or 5 years, depending on which country you're in. If we're acknowledging that corporations really rule the world, we have a more direct form of democracy through capitalism by voting with our money. In this way, we get to vote every day. And so in that way, as consumers, we are more powerful than as voters. So every pound we spend, every dollar we spend, could be considered a vote. I recently read about a friend shared a petition on Facebook that was a petition to Virgin Media, or whatever you call them, Virgin Corporation, to get them to not advertise in the Sun newspaper in the UK, which would obviously deny the Sun newspaper a lot of money if they did take people up on that. And that could be very influential, and it's not a new idea to boycott things, but if we could club together as consumers and deny our money to corporations that are engaged in unethical behaviour, we can exert an influence. If the corporations are interested in making money, which of course they all are, they will go where the money is. So if as consumers we were able to vote ethically with our money, corporations would act ethically. Corporations are amoral. They're not interested in ethics or being good or being bad. They have no interest in those things. All they're interested in is the pursuit of money, which is what it is. And that's capitalism, and you can hate it if you want, but that's the world the way it is, and it's unlikely that that's going to change anytime soon. But within that system, we have great power if we could club together as a group and use our money or deny our money to promote changes in the way we want to see them. It only works when we have a media that calls companies out on these things, though. Vegans are familiar with this concept of controlling the way the world is through boycotting things, because that's what essentially we're doing. We're boycotting all animal products, and with a lower demand, the supply should follow then, and there'll be less animal cruelty. Obviously, the more people that go vegan, the greater the reduction of demand, so the lower the supply of animal products. So the world could be anything we wanted it to be. We have it the way it is, but it could have easily been, if humans had understood and perceived our own nature as I do, that we actually should be primarily frugivorous and vegan, the world we would have created would be drastically different to the one we have. We could have planted fruit trees all over the world, and we could have populated the entire earth with trees that would have supported us, and we could spend far less time labouring and just being on the treadmill, as I call it, and just doing meaningless tasks to maintain the status quo that we don't need. We could have if we understood our nature better, a lot of the work that we do, a lot of the menial stuff that we do, it would be made irrelevant, and we wouldn't need to do it. The world could be drastically different, and what I would consider a utopia. And that's all possible for the future. But we have to acknowledge and we have to understand what we are and work towards that collectively. We could spend our time on some labour, because I don't think it's all bad. There's certain things that are rewarding, like building structures to live in, or beautiful structures to enjoy, like social places, theatres and collective projects like that, art. We could spend our time on things like that, just art and entertainment, and indulge in our curiosity in the world and in space. We could do great things, but then you get into what's the reason for living, and that's the meaning of life. That's not the remit of this video. I'm just talking about the world as it is. So I feel like I've probably covered more or less in general what I think, and I hope it's been of value, of interest to you. So please do all the regular stuff I have to try and tell you to do. Do it or don't do it, it's up to you. But do it. So thanks for watching. Cheers.